Hope everyone is handling this heat well. It definitely lets you know that you are in Florida. It's perfect weather like 10 months out of the year, and then there's July and August. That's how I describe it to everybody who says, "Hey, how you liking Florida?" I'm like, I love Florida's weather. It's amazing. 10 months out of the year. But some of you like this heat, and that's all right too. Well, I hope you guys are gearing up for the 4th of July weekend. It's a busy time of year for a lot of people, especially the kids are out of school. It's fun. A lot of people travel. This is the 247th Independence Day coming up. 247. That's pretty impressive. This is the time of year where families are traveling a lot, right? And maybe you've been this, or maybe you have experienced this. But I'm sure at some point in your life you have either felt this, said it yourself, or heard it from the back seat. You're on a long drive and a long road trip, and somebody says, "Are we there yet?" Man, you guys are all over this morning. You guys finishing the video. You guys are in tune. I love that. It's so great to be in tune when we come to service because we're all joined together to kind of tie in. So, are we there yet? This morning we're going to talk about this road to freedom. And road trips were a lot more adventurous before the invention of GPS, right? Because there's a whole nother skill set involved, and there was a whole nother dynamic going on in the cab of the truck, especially if you're married, right? Because now you have this GPS that says, go 200 miles, take a right, take a left. Before you had the husband saying, "Where are you going? You made the wrong turn." Or they're trying to read a map, right? This whole other dimension came in, this map reading. And I miss map reading. Anybody else miss reading maps? It was kind of fun, right? I once took a shortcut through the Ozark Mountains. And if you know what I just said, you know that there is no such thing as a shortcut through the Ozark Mountains. You know that little key that they had up on the top of the page? It said, 1 inch equals, 200 miles. And I measured it out. And I was measuring, and I'm like, this is going to save us hours. It ended up costing me hours because you get behind these slow cars going, 25-mile-hour switchbacks, and, there's no shortcut to the Ozarks. If you take nothing else away today, just know that. So you got to have a lot of faith, right? Now we have GPS, so we have a lot of faith in our GPS. And God has a natural built-in GPS for us. And Proverbs 3 reminds us of this. He says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding." And that's a lot like a GPS, right? You program it in, and if you got Waze, you may know the route. But if you're a Wazer, and some of you guys don't know what Waze is, but if you're a Wazer, you know that if it's sending you on another route, you're going to follow it. Because there's a wreck or there's something going on that road that it's diverting you, and you know that it's going to take you the fastest way to get to your destination. So WAZE, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's an app. It's amazing. It's fun. It's faster than most GPS maps. So that's another freebie. You guys are getting all these freebies when you come to the Jax Church. This is amazing. This is amazing. Well, today we want to talk about one of the most famous road trips of all times, right? It's the Israelites' journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. And I have a short video to kind of give you a little bit of a history of where and how they got there. Let's watch this video and figure out how this happened. Oh, go ahead and play that if you can.
Then Moses is born. he leads the people out of Egypt to Mount Sinai, or in Deuteronomy, it's called Horeb. And at Mount Sinai, they receive the 10 Commandments, and then they're to travel to Kadesh Barnea by that road. It only takes 11 days to go that far. But then there, God commands them to invade Canaan, the land that he's giving them. But they are disobedient, and they don't do it. So God disciplines them, and they wander in the wilderness for 38 years. And then the next generation takes over, and they travel across the desert to the plains of Moab, and there they listen to their pastor, Moses, as he delivers 3 sermons, which is the book of Deuteronomy. Right after those 3 sermons, he dies, is buried near Beth Peor, and then the new leader, Joshua, takes the next generation across the Jordan into the promised land.
Okay, so this road trip that was supposed to only last maybe a few weeks, a month at the most, maybe as much as 6 months, right? They left Egypt and they go on this road called the Road by the Sea. We know that from Isaiah chapter 9. And it was a very popular road that a lot of people traveled. And they were following where God sent them down to Mount Sinai and then up to Canaan. And then they kind of rebelled against God. They were afraid to follow what God was calling them into. And a journey that was 170 miles. And to top it off, it was a scenic route along the river, along the ocean's edge, right, along the sea's edge. It really wasn't too bad of a trip. If you and I were to take that, it would be about the same distance to go from Jacksonville, Florida to Tallahassee, Florida. Yeah, not something you want to just get up and do every day, right? But it's doable. If you were to walk it 170 miles, it would probably take you about 60 hours, 2.5 days to walk, right? And that's keeping a good schedule and keeping a pretty good clip. So let's just say it's going to take you a week. Not too bad. I mean, back in those days, there was no Uber. There was no call up the local chariot to give you a ride. There was no air travel. So it's not a bad trip, right? And besides, you just got freed from the land of Egypt, and now God is taking you to your hope's desire and a promise that he's made to you. So you're not like walking like, man, why do I got to walk to Tallahassee? You're walking with eagerness, and you're like, we are going to the promised land. When we get to Tallahassee, we are going to be shown all that God has for us. So you are excited, you're resolute, you're walking with a clip, right? You know that there is something that you are being called to. But you get to Lake City, and you're like, I don't want to go through Lake City. Why? Well, because the people there are just a little different. I probably am offending somebody. I'm not. My intention is not to put down Lake City or anyone from Lake City. My point is, when they got to Canaan, they were afraid to follow where God was doing it because there was a conflict that was going to take place there, right? And in human nature, we are by nature conflict avoiders, are we not? I mean, some of us are not. Some of us live with this desire to like mix it up. I, for one, would rather wrestle a tiger than be in conflict with a person. It just takes every sap of energy out of us. However, we understand that at times conflict's necessary and we could work through it. But the goal is to get to the resolution. I am like way off base now. Where are we going? Don't always follow the GPS. Don't go off track. All right? So So these guys were called to walk, to travel with their concubine 170 miles to get there, right? Recently, our SAMS is their South American Mission Society, right? So for years, we have been partnered with the church in Paraguay, personally, on a relationship level. And that is changing. We haven't lost that relationship, but what has happened in SAMS is some new churches that had not been giving to foreign missions have come into our society, and we're excited about that. And one of those churches had a really strong relationship with the church in Paraguay. So a lot of you are hearing this for the first time. So we have been asked if we can now partner with the church in Quito, Ecuador, on a relationship level, not forgoing the relationship with Paraguay, but there is a new church that has an established relationship with the leaders there in Paraguay. And in order to make all of the South American Mission Society stronger, we've invited them in. They're going to partner with Paraguay, and we're going to partner with Quito, Ecuador. So if you were to walk to Quito, Ecuador, right, it would be over 2,000 miles. And I put it in Google. Waze wouldn't take it either. I put it in to see how long would this take. And it says, not advised. Not advised. We could not calculate this journey, right? There's going to be too many things that come up along the road, like take an airplane, do something else. So I want to talk for a minute about the road. Sal and Sandy shared a little bit about the road, the journey that they've been on. And we're so grateful that God has decided to keep them here with us, and that God is doing a great thing. And, they're taking a huge step of faith and stepping out, starting his own practice. And we can all, pray for that and make sure that God's going to, bless that. But can you imagine how Moses felt? He grabs his phone, he types in, directions to the promised land, right? And okay, it's only going to take 11 days. We've got this. I bet we can make it in 10. Do you guys ever race the GPS and think you could beat it a little bit? I know some of you dads look really guilty at the moment. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we could beat it. 39 years later, what? The GPS said 11 days. 39 years later, they finally make it to the promised land. But what about Moses? He doesn't even get to go in. Right? I mean, Dad's been driving. Let's just call Moses Dad for right now. Dad's been driving. The kids for 39 years have been screaming, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? How much longer?" "Oh, I'm sure it's just going to be another day or two. Anytime now." 39 years of hearing the grumbling, of hearing the boredom, of hearing the discontent of the Israelites. 39 years. Now, this period in history is called the wandering. I mean, you can even imagine how many times Moses cried out to God and said, "God, I can't handle these guys anymore. They keep saying, 'Are we there yet? When can we go? How much longer?'" And yet he is completely held from going in. As I studied some of this out, I started asking my questions, the same question, over and over again. Why weren't they there yet? What was going on? What kept them from going in? Why did it take so long? And exactly who were they waiting on? Were the Israelites waiting on God to open the door for them to go in? Or was God waiting on them? It became clear as I looked at this, God is never in a hurry. God is not going to take shortcuts. He's not going to just gloss over things. He's not going to just tell you things are great when they're not. He's not going to just make things happen when things aren't right. That's not his character. It's not in his makeup. He can't just give, he can't just break his own laws and decrees. He knows that he still needed to do some work in the Israelites' lives. God told them what their ultimate destination was. He gave them the vision of the promised land. He called them, he got them hopeful and excited. But he knew it wasn't going to happen overnight. And he knew that the hearts of the Israelites needed to go through some transformation. They kind of got off track and they started getting messed up, and he had to kind of fix that. And even though he gave them the vision, it didn't mean that they were going to be there next week. The road is not always a direct route. That was true for the Israelites, and that's true for you and I. God is not always going to make a straight line to the answer that you're looking for in prayer. God is not always going to take the least evasive way out of the problems and the struggles that you are in. You might be in some marital challenges. You might be in some financial difficulties. You might be struggling with some health issues. And that doesn't mean that God is going to give you the easiest and the most direct route out of harm's way. That the challenges and the struggles have a purpose. And sometimes we find ourselves waiting on God. God, how much longer? Are we there yet? Can you answer this prayer already? I mean, don't you see I'm suffering here? I have to walk to Tallahassee. It should only take me a few days. But God has been taking me years. And there's some things in my character that I prayed for when I was a brand new Christian. I am still praying those prayers. God, help me to overcome my selfishness. Help me to overcome my frustrations, my anger. Why do things get me going so much? I don't know. Maybe you guys have something that you've been praying for a long time that you can relate with. Right? I mean, we're all just being real here. That we want the promise. But sometimes we're afraid of the journey. Right? The road is not always a direct route. Abraham was told that you're going to be the father of a great nation. But it took decades for him to be able to have his first son. Joseph was a teenager with a dream from God that one day his entire family will bow down to him. However, that wouldn't happen for another 13 years. 13 years with a trip full of a lot of detours and a lot of challenges, right? But again, let me ask you, who was waiting on who? I mean, Joseph was this spoiled, self-centered 17-year-old who was really ready to live in the land that God and to give him the promises that he had promised him. Or was Joseph not really where he needed to be yet, and he had to go through a lot of challenges and trials to learn that what God was doing through this whole circumstance? Moses felt compelled to go free his people, but it didn't work out that way. In 40 years, he's been wandering in the desert. David was anointed by Samuel to replace Saul as king. But it would take another 20 years before David would wear the crown. God is not in a hurry. What should take 11 days or maybe a couple months ends up taking 39 years. But what is the goal in all of this? What is God trying to do? Is God just trying to get us somewhere? Or is God trying to get us somewhere? Right? I mean, is it a location? Or is it a place in our hearts that He's working on? God cares more about who we are when we get there than how long it takes us to get there. Right? Being God's people was never about geography. He doesn't care where we're at physically as it opposed to geography. But He does absolutely care, no matter where we are at, about where we are at in our hearts. And that goes with every circumstance. You can be right and still be wrong. We could be absolutely right about a situation, but the way we're reacting, the way that we're handling it can be completely wrong. I find myself there often. Like, I feel like I'm right. I feel like I'm right. I'm right to make this stand. But sometimes the way I make the stand is not right. Right? Is that clear? I mean, am I making sense? You know, and we've got to make sure that we're still understanding that God is working on us, that He's still helping us get there. You know, the bottom line is that God's people, when Moses led them up to Canaan and wandering around the desert, they weren't ready to receive God's promise. They weren't who they needed to be, right? They weren't who they needed to be. So why did it take them so long? Why did it take, for as much as possible, a 6-month trip take 40 years? Because God did not just get the people out of Egypt, He had to get Egypt out of His people. Right? And there's so many times in our lives that we go back to being the worldly people that we were before we came to Christ. And sometimes God is working on us saying, guys, look, I gotta purge this world from your life. I gotta get it out of you. Because as much as I'm teaching you, as much as I've shown my love, as much as I've directed and commanded and have been patient with you, you still are using the world's wisdom to kind of reconcile this situation. Right? We're still trying to fight earthly battles when we're called to live a heavenly life. And this is like every person's struggle. Right? We battle the carnal flesh. We're constantly battling these worldly principles that are going on inside of us. So basically, what we're saying is, God, are we there yet? God, are we done with me yet? Like, how much longer, God? Like, man, I sacrificed. You remember that time I fasted? You remember that time I gave up all that stuff for that prayer? Like, why are you calling me into that again? Why do I have to continue to surrender myself to you? I mean, God, are you insecure? Did I not prove myself to you? Do you not see my worth? I don't know if you value me as much as I value me. And we slowly take lordship back. Just being real. We all need to look at our lives and wrestle with the journey that God has us on. But God, I wanted to be married. But God, I wanted children. But God, I wanted to be financially independent. But God, I wanted to be retired by now. But God, I wanted to be healthy. But God, I wanted to be happy. And yet, I'm struggling. We grow weary we grow frustrated, we question God, we get bored. Basically, we're in the back seat saying, are we there yet? Are we there yet? You understand that God has a place that God wants His people. That place is not geographical. That place is somewhere that we find contentment, that we find joy, that we find a peace in spite of our circumstances. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to wrestle. He absolutely desires us to wrestle. He wants us to go through that struggle. He wants that because He doesn't want us to just kind of like get there. He wants us to be there. And this is like an English teacher's worst nightmare, this sermon. You know, the place that He wants to be is where He wants us to make sure that we are there with Him. You know, and even if we don't know the reasons why we don't have a full understanding of this, He wants us to understand that He's working on us, and there's a trust there. That no matter what's going on, I mean, we're getting ready to go into like political craziness. Stay off of social media. Stay out of the news. Like I'm telling you, it's going to get crazy. And Satan's trying to turn you and I against each other. And he's going to raise all kinds of Cain and like create confusion and get people passionately working against each other. But all of that is Satan's ploy. We've got to remember that God is in control. And as much as it depends on us, that we're going to be at complete peace with each other. And we're going to understand that God doesn't work through our politics. That we've got to make sure that we are Christians going through the election. You know, maybe today you'll find yourself like the Israelites, not where or who you really want to be. I mean, you know, I know that there's a place that you want to be. I know that you have dreams and goals for yourself, and maybe you're not quite there. But there's a person that God's called you to be, and a person that He's created you to be. You know, like, here's a Bible. Here is a very crusty old work glove. This glove was designed and it was created for a purpose, right? I mean, the inventor of this, the creator of this said, look, I'm going to create a glove that's meant to work, right? So I'm going to put this glove to work and I'm going to say, glove, work. Grab that Bible, pick it up, read it. It's not working. It needs some encouragement, guys. Let's give it some encouragement. Hey, come on, glove, you could do this. You could do this. The glove isn't working. You know what? It needs some guidance and direction. We're going to disciple it a little bit. Glove, listen. Listen, take your fingers, grab it, work. It's not working. You know what it needs? It needs more fellowship. So we're going to bring some other gloves. Oh, there's some. All kinds of different colors. We got a multicultural fellowship. Now that he's got some other gloves to work with it's going to work better. Glove, work. It's not working, right? The glove won't work until it's filled, right? Until it's filled with the human hands that it was created to be put into it. You know, so often God has called us to fulfill our mission, our purpose that He's called us to be. He's designed us for it. He's called us to glorify Him, to worship Him. And we're out there and we're sitting here like a glove without the Holy Spirit in us, without tapping into the power of God, saying, all right, I'm going to go out and try to do this my way. And we don't realize that we're just like this flimsy little glove. We're not filled with the power. We're not doing it God's way. See, God's plan was not just to design us for a purpose, but it was to design us to be with Him so that we can do it His way. So we need to fill ourselves to be useful to God, right? Got to get a little Bible in here, sorry. 1 Corinthians 10:9, this is in the Message version. He says, look, all of these writings, right? He's talking about the scriptures, what he's been writing. These were all warning markers, danger, in our history books written down so that we don't repeat their mistakes. Our positions in the story are parallel. They at the beginning, we at the end. We are just as capable of messing up as they were. Don't be so naive and self-confident. You're not exempt. You could fall flat on your face as easy as anyone else. Forget about self-confidence. It's useless. Cultivate God confidence. So we could look at the Israelites and say, look, if I was on that trip, I would not mess up. I'm just going to obey. We could so easily look at the scriptures and say, like, look, these guys have never fallen on anything. Like, what are they doing? These guys are always messing up. I'm so glad that we're not repeating the sins of the past. Right? But the truth of the matter is we've all fallen short. And we all are just like that. And that's what Paul's telling us. He says, look, our positions in the story are parallel. You're just like them. You're just like them. Yeah, they were 2,000, 4,000, 3,000 years ago. But you're today doing the same thing. We are just as capable of messing up as they are. So don't be naive. Don't trust in yourself. Fill yourself with the Holy Spirit. Fill yourself with God. Let God carry you. Right? Cultivate a God confidence. That it's not through your talents and abilities, it's through Him that's working through us. Amen? Right? So God is working through us. Paul tells Timothy, he says, all Scripture is God-breathed and it's useful. Right? It's useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. The Bible is useful. Right? It's useful for teaching us, training us, correcting us, rebuking us at times if need be, so that we can be thoroughly equipped. But if we're not using it, if we're not reading it, if we're not studying it, if we're not adapting it, it's not useful. It's not useful. I want to close out here. There was a chief who was a very kind man, a very strong man, and he was known for his lack of partiality when it came to justice. The problem was that among the tribe, there were some thieves. Apparently, they thought there was a thief because there were many things that would turn up missing amongst the community. And at first, the theft was petty. It was small little things. So the chief issued a decree that whoever was doing this would be beaten with 10 lashes. But as time went on, the problem got worse. The king said, whoever is doing this will be beaten with 40 lashes. Which was another way of saying they will be beaten possibly to death because few people could endure 40 lashes. So time went on and everybody in the community worked together to find the culprit. And to the shock of everyone, the chief's own mother was a thief. So now the tribe said, how is the chief going to handle this? I mean, is he going to go with love and exonerate his mother and forget about justice and forget about the 40 lashes that he said was going to happen to the culprit? That would be one possibility. The other possibility is he really going to sentence his mother to 40 lashes so that this frail woman undoubtedly would be killed? Is that what he's going to do? So the chief decided that the laws needed to be upheld. That if anyone was going to respect the laws of the community, that he needed to go through with the sentencing. So his mother was sentenced to 40 lashes. So on the day of judgment, his mother was brought before the community, and everybody was weeping and crying because they knew that this poor woman would die that day. The chief walks up with tears in his eyes, and he hugs his mom. And as he backs away from her, she's crying out and grasping for her son. The chief turns to the punishers, I don't know what the name of the punishers would be, and says, proceed. And just before they rear back and start the lashes, the son grabs his mom and hugs her and takes the 40 lashes himself, shielding her from the blows. That's the gospel. That is the story of the gospel of Jesus. That although we deserve death for the sins that we have committed, Jesus wrestled, how do I uphold the righteousness and the justice of God and yet display the same love that God has for all of His children? The answer is the cross. That Jesus knew that He needed to shield us. So He took our punishment for us. With that, I'm going to have Xavier come up and lead our thoughts in communion.